So the issue that we have coming up is also an in-depth issue and very important. As you see, item number 5 on the agenda. City of Austin policies regarding assaults on EMS medics. There's a situation that took place earlier this month, I believe, that we became aware of, and it involved an incident involving an EMS paramedic unit that needed help, and the response that resulted after that. I will pass it to Commissioner Weber to get a little more detail in that, but we're going to hear a little bit about what happened, and we're going to have a discussion about policy and about response time. It may be a little technical to you, but this is an issue that we think is deserving of some attention. It's been kind of brewing for a while. So, Commissioner Weber, do you want to start?
Yeah, so in your backups, you have a CBS Austin story from earlier this month about an increase in assaults on our medics. And then you also have the results of a department-wide EMS survey that I believe was conducted earlier this spring that also came out of concern for this issue, which I believe the union has been raising for a while now. And it kind of came to a head in August with a couple of really violent assaults, and it brought up a number of issues. One is just the response in the moment. And so I gave y'all a tweet here that a really wonderful police officer whose account I follow tweeted out over the weekend when an APD officer was injured. And he tweets, "We would like to thank the men and women who dropped everything when they heard Officer Down over the radio. Our unwavering commitment to one another in time of need is truly a special bond. Thank you." And this, I'm giving this to you as an example of how I believe the police department should react anytime one of our public servants is being assaulted or is injured. And and I'm giving it to you as I believe this officer is a real credit to his department, and that the police department does a great job of protecting their own when they're in distress and need help. And so one issue that's in front of us is whether or not that same, whether that same response happens if a medic is in need of help. And the other issue that has been raised is kind of what happens after an assault. So after someone has the situation has been made safe, someone has been given medical care, do they choose to swear out a complaint? And then what does the department do to ensure that they are respected and informed throughout the process of trying to get justice through the criminal justice system for the assault? And so Ed and I together asked the department a number of questions relating, both departments, APD and EMS, a number of questions around this issue, and there just really wasn't enough time for either department to come back and present to us. But who is here today is Selena Shia, who is the president of the EMS Employees Association, and then Kevin, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name. Kevin Hart, who is one of our public servants and who is here to tell kind of what happened to him related to this. So with that, I'll...
Thank you all so much. My name's Selena. I'm president of the Austin EMS Association. I really echo what Rebecca has said. We certainly are being assaulted. I want to thank the department for putting out the survey. They put this out in late May. And I just want to share two particular findings right now. Have you ever been assaulted while on duty as an EMS provider? 80% of our medics have said more than once. 20% said only once. Have you been assaulted within the last 2 years? 63% of our medics have said they've been assaulted. So definitely this is very alarming. And the association has really thought about this. Our first quarterly meeting, we actually invited 2 of our members who do self-defense. And so the department let us borrow an ambulance, and we actually worked on self-defense techniques in the back of the ambulance to really think about how to respond when an incident like this is happening. In May, we actually paid for a training certification so that these medics are officially trainers to teach self-defense. In the end of May, the department put out their survey. In June, one of our board members created a survey to actually track medic assaults, because right now, if you are assaulted, there's no way to actually inform the department except for just to let your commander know. But then if you ask to fill out a form, there really isn't one that exists. So the reason why the survey was necessary is because we didn't actually know how much this was happening or when this was happening. Colloquially, the way that we were tracking it is purely by OJI. So if you didn't fill out OJI paperwork, we really didn't know what was happening. In August, 3 of our medics actually went to Dallas to do this training. We also spoke with CBS with Melanie over there. We had one of our medics talk about her horrific event. I'll just share it briefly. She wanted to be here, but she's in a clinical for paramedic school. But basically, they showed up on scene, and the person that they were called for actually sideswiped her legs, and so they knocked her down. She has bruises all up and down one side of her body, and then that person started crawling up her legs, grabbing and biting her, and so she had marks all up the one side of her body. And so that happened in March, and that really is what spurred us into thinking about what we need to do to protect our providers. Rebecca is also correct in talking about these cycles. So the first thing we really want to think about is prevention, and so that's why we sent these medics up to learn self-defense techniques. One way that I hope that we can make this more widespread is I hope that the department we have continuing education quarterly, and I really hope that the department invites these medics who did this training to teach self-defense to everybody in the department, not that just those who choose to come to our meetings. So that's on the prevention side. When we go through the actual assault side, we do have some concerns. A few weeks ago when this incident happened, our medic was in the back of the ambulance. The patient was extremely cooperative. And then the patient started trying to dig into the drawers where we have our scalpels, where we have our IV kits. And so the medic told the patient to not go there and started closing the drawers. And the patient just completely flipped, took off all his restraints, his seatbelts, and then just started pounding on the medic, broke his safety glasses, black eye, busted lip. And there was nothing for him. There's nothing for him to report online anywhere. He just told the commander. The other thing is we had about an 8-minute APD response time for that particular incident, and it's just a one-on-one, and he's not armed at all. And so I actually wanted to investigate on the police side how that could happen, and so I reached out to Chief Gay. I also let my chief and Chief Brown know that I was going to reach out to him, and that was the first time that Chief Rodriguez had actually heard about the assault, and that was 3 days later. And so there has to be a way that our chief is aware of these assaults happening much quicker than me reaching out, and especially when his medic got walloped on. I mean, it was really bad. And so then when we talk about the APD response issue, when an officer is being assaulted, the call that the officers see is officer in distress. When EMS is being assaulted, the code that they see is EMS request code 3. We request officers code 3 for a whole variety of reasons. One of those is that we are assaulted. Other reasons are crowd control. Let's say we're trying to take care of a patient, access a patient, and we can't get through the crowds. Other reasons are if there are animals that are attacking a patient, or if two people in the scene start fighting each other. But I do believe that if the officers saw that it was medic is down, we would receive a different kind of response. We would see a break in calls. I know that technically when officers get a code 3 request, that they are supposed to all act the same, but we also all make choices. And when an officer sees that the call is officer is down, they will stop doing their paperwork, they will break their call and go to that call. When they see EMS request code 3, they don't actually know what that call is for unless they open up the call. And so if they don't open up the call, then they don't know that a medic is down. So my solution to that is actually just to create a new call type that says medic in distress, just like we have one for officers in distress. I know that the other thing is that when we press our EID button, this is what we hear from communications, is that they request a lot of information before they even dispatch the call. So they want to know what's going on. And most of the time, if we're in a situation where we're being beaten up, we're not going to be able to respond to all those questions. So I have an example in the past where one of our medics asked for assistance, and a bystander actually yelled into the phone, "The medic needs help." And they didn't get a police response. And then afterwards, we talked to them, and they said, "Well, we didn't really know what you needed help with. Did you need help with paperwork? Did you need help with being beaten up?" I mean, you know, when we ask for help, it should get the same kind of officers down code. So those are a few of our suggestions. As far as the long-term stuff with reporting, like I said, the association has a assault report form right now. I know that the department has one in the works. I believe that the safety officer has it and is waiting for final approval. So we'll keep our form up until the department officially has theirs up. We've already had 10 people turn in the form to say that they've been assaulted, and most of them have been because the board member knows about the form and has asked them to do it. So I think that the actual assault levels in the past 3 months has actually been much higher than that. We want this to be a department form because they can put it on a lot of different pages and a lot easier for our medics to access than going through the association, although we are making attempts. And I know that they have an improvement group working, and they're meeting Thursday, and I looked at some of their goals, and they seem very good. I think my concern is that every time this event happens, I am really honestly concerned that one of our medics is going to be severely hurt. And so I just hope that we move very quickly, and we know that these improvement groups can take a while to do their work. So all I'm requesting is that this work be expedited, that the department put up a form quickly at our next CE. We have self-defense training, and that we really look at how we dispatch between EMS and APD and what we can do to make sure that we get the same kind of response. Kevin Harner here has been assaulted, and he actually had a positive outcome with his, but he just wanted to share a little bit about what it's like to be there by yourself dealing with this.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Harner. I'm one of the paramedic captains for Austin Travis County EMS. I'm also a board member. So on June 10th, I was working up north, and I was dispatched to a psychiatric call in our district. Now, several years ago, for whatever reason, psychiatric calls quit getting AFD dispatched as well as our ambulances. So we go to those by ourselves. Now, in the city, every psychiatric call also has law enforcement dispatched as well. However, they're dispatched non-emergently most of the time, and we are dispatched emergently most of the time. So it is not uncommon at all for us to get there sometimes long before anybody else gets there. So on this particular night, we have computers in all of the ambulances, and we can read all of the conversation stuff that our dispatchers put in that goes on between the caller and our dispatcher. And that kind of gives us a heads up as to what we're coming into, what we should expect. Is there something that is happening that we should not go in? Just a generalization of hopefully what it is that we're about to embark on. On this particular one, it was a 10-year-old caller who said that mom was having a nervous breakdown over financial issues, and that she was not violent, posed no danger, and was just trying to hurt herself. So when we pulled up, the apartment door, which was up on a second level, was wide open, and I could see that this 10-year-old caller had the phone in his hand, and he was looking down, and he had this look of, "Please help me now." So as I get out of the ambulance and I start walking towards the bottom of the stairs, an 8-year-old female comes running down the stairs, haphazardly carrying a 3-year-old male with a look of terror on both of their faces. And then the caller ends up coming down the stairs, and eventually I see our patient in the threshold of the apartment door. She proceeds to make some very odd gestures and moves, and I thought that she was actually going to jump down the stairs and harm herself. So I climbed up the stairs, instructed her to sit on the stairs, which she did. And then as I was controlling that situation, I looked back to make sure that all the children were okay, and my partner was tending to them. This is all happening very rapidly. And as I turned around, she stood up and she hit me right across the face as hard as she could. Of course, that came out of left field. I had no idea that that was about to happen. So I was okay. I wasn't knocked unconscious or anything like that. I had her sit back down. We had a very quick conversation. She apologized, said she wouldn't do it again. I instructed her to slide down on her bottom down the stairs. We get down to the bottom of the stairs, and again, out of nowhere, she stands up and hits me yet again. This time, it required a response from me, for which I was able to physically subdue her in a non-threatening way and wait for APD to finally arrive. We did request them code 3. Fortunately, they were already assigned to the call from the beginning. Just like I said, it takes them longer to get there than it takes us. So they got there, and they helped me to get her to the cot. She was less than cooperative. And then another APD officer showed up to help us, and she promptly kicked him in the nose, potentially breaking his nose. Now, after that, the physical violence of the situation was mitigated, and we were able to provide care for her and transport her to the hospital and ultimately get the care that she needed. Fortunately for me, it was followed up with, and it was followed up with the DA's office and everything else. So I did have a positive outcome with that. I requested my commander to come so that I can make a report. I was assaulted. And when speaking with him, he said, well, what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to make a report. And he said, you mean with APD? I said, well, of course, obviously with APD. I did do that, but I want to make a departmental report. And quite literally, he shrugged his shoulders and said, what are you talking about? What report? There is no report to make. There is no tracking mechanism. There is no way for our department to learn about this incident. The only way that it can be learned of is if I was physically injured and made an actual OJI report, for which I didn't need to make an OJI report, or through APD. That is the only way that my department has any knowledge that I was assaulted.
Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate your service and your telling that story, and I think it's just a kind of snapshot of what some of y'all go through there. I'm going to open this up to questions. Of course, if we have questions for staff as well. We do have the time issue. We'll keep on top of that as well. Again, we're going to get our legislative update in too. But who would like to go first?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you're talking OJI, I am assuming that's on-the-job incident?
On-the-job injury. So
Injury.
if I'm physically or mentally injured, for that matter, I can file a claim stating such, and that does have a specific process that it goes through with our department. But
Okay.
Go ahead.
And in this situation where you're responding to a call, why would not that be an OJI?
So it was not an OJI because I did not feel that I was injured to the point where I needed to make a claim of injury. I was assaulted physically, and I certainly had, a red mark on my face, but I did not feel that it needed or warranted further medical treatment.
Okay.
Usually we file OJI paperwork if we think that we need to make a workers' comp claim.
Right.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Harris?
Sure. So firstly, thank you so much for coming, talking about your experience and what's going on. I think this is an important issue for the community to understand and appreciate your service and everything. I wanted to first see if I could just clarify some parts of the survey to make sure I understand this appropriately. So the first is that it says 93% of the assaults occur in the back of the unit. Is that correct? Is it?
Yeah, the majority, usually, sometimes on scene, but
Right,
for the
right.
most part, it's when you're one-on-one in the back of the ambulance.
Okay. And then it seems like, because there isn't a zero option, that 100% of folks have been assaulted.
Right.
Is it-
I
am-
should have. I know. I just noticed that too. I should have just
Okay.
said 146. Said more than once out of the. They didn't break it down into exactly how many field folks. It looks like about 200 or so.
Okay, so it's a vast majority
Yeah.
nonetheless, but it's not 100%.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the last thing I wanted to clarify was it says the top 3 conditions that contributed were impairment, aggressive behavior, or possibly experiencing a mental or behavioral health condition. Do y'all have any numbers about that, or is that, is that mostly speculative, just assumption on the part of the person?
Yeah, most of that information comes from when we ask medical history.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of know, we also ask, have you had any drugs or alcohol tonight? And so we know if there's any kind of intoxicant or what kind of medical history they have that we might mark as that.
Okay. Well, I guess what I would say generally is that I think obviously having police respond in a manner that's similar to how they would respond to their own issues makes a lot of sense to me, as does obviously you all receiving additional training, given that this seems like an inevitable part of the job, unfortunately. I guess the other question I had was, the last question, is, this commission passed an item last session about mental health first response, and there's been a lot of talk about potentially including, behavioral health, mental health specialists with you all on some of these calls. What's your take on how that might assist or help with particularly these calls where there is a behavioral health issue that might be contributing? Do you have a sense on whether or not that will have an impact at all?
Yeah, I think that especially if we were to develop a stronger patchwork of making sure that our folks that we know have mental health issues get follow-up care, then that would be helpful just to make sure that they don't get in this situation again. Some of the people that are our patients are very challenging because mental health is just a very challenging area. And so a lot of times folks think that they're better and they don't need to be on their medicines anymore. They don't like the way it feels, and so they go off of it. It's a little different than having high blood pressure and other things. And so I certainly think that making sure that our community health paramedics are robust and can follow up and make sure that people are getting the appropriate care that they need is important. When it comes to the acute stuff, a lot of times we just don't know because it'll come out as a fall 4 or some other thing, and it won't be coded in the exact right way.
Right.
But certainly, as soon as we know, if we can get response very quick, then that's helpful. Right now, our issues with MCOT and even mental health officers is there just aren't enough, and so the response times can be quite long.
Right.
And I also certainly don't want to suggest that our officers see that a medic is down and are choosing to respond differently. It's really just the call type is not specific enough to say that a medic is down.
Right.
I think if we had that call type, we would actually elicit a different response.
Great.
One quick question just for Chief Gay. To create a code that says medic in distress, how complicated would that be, and how long would it take to get something like that implemented?
My one comment is it shouldn't take that long, but I do have our chief over our communications, Chief Guajardo, if you wanted to answer that real quick.
So, to answer your question in regards to the title or creating a call type, it wouldn't take much to do that, and we would look into that, obviously. It was concerning to me when I got this information, or I got this request to look into these 3 incidents, because I want to make sure that we are treating our public safety partners the same way we treat ourselves. And in that particular call that you're talking about that happened a week ago where the officer commented on social media, that particular call was a person that had a knife, threatening people, and a gun. So the majority of our calls, and in particular that call itself, we're going to have backup already on the way. And so a lot of times when we do have these officer needs assistance or O&A calls or officer down, however you want to put it, we already have backup going to that. So I wanted to make sure that our protocols were the same. So we looked into that, and our protocols, when there is a medic that needs some assistance, or if you will, a medic down, we handle it the same way we do our own calls for an ONA or officer needs assistance. Same protocol, same everything. We have the dispatcher get with EMS's dispatcher, make sure that that where the location is, what it is, and then we sound out for the nearest 2 available units to that medic unit. The only difference that we do not do as far as protocols is that we do not tone it out. In other words, we don't have a tone go out citywide, but we do find the closest 2 units available to proceed to that. But obviously, if we look into creating a different type of call, yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
And just to reiterate is that we're committed to working with EMS and with the leadership and the association to ensure that this isn't a long process. This is a short conversation that if we need to make changes, we'll do that immediately.
Commissioner Hollis.
Yeah, one quick question for you and then a quick comment. Do you guys have any kind of services or debriefs or anything after these? Because there's also psychological trauma that's involved when you experience an assault, and we know that. So what services do you guys have available that you can use for that kind of thing?
Our department has made very available, we have a very robust peer support team. We also have Tanya Glenn and her services that do PTSD. And I think our medics do avail ourselves of that service very often. I think that the department has shown a great willingness in trying to make sure that there aren't lasting psychological effects.
Okay. And then just based on what you've said, I have a couple of thoughts. One is it seems like there might be a disconnect on your communications floor between your EMS dispatchers and your police dispatchers, where they're not getting information back and forth as fast as they need to, or you're getting, it sounded like what you were saying is they would ask for more information when you couldn't provide it. They need to say, hey, we can't provide that information. And so that might be a training issue for you guys where you need to say, hey, we don't have it, you need to go. And recognize that these are people in danger as much as your police officers, but they don't have the weapons to protect themselves. And that's a bigger concern in many ways. They're not wearing vests. They're not, that they're almost at a higher risk. And that's really concerning to me. That they're putting their lives out there too, but it's like when I've been out with y'all and I don't have a gun or anything, so I know that it's my buddy in the car that's going to be taking care of me. Well, they don't even have that, and so you just be cognizant of that, and also maybe thinking about talking to officers about when they see ambulances or they see that an ambulance has been dispatched, the way that you guys go and check on each other and you back each other up, and you'll just drive by, okay, are they cool, and then keep going. Maybe do the same thing for your ambulances and say, hey, let's just roll by and make sure they're okay, and do that kind of check-in the way that you check in for each other. I think that might be a good idea.
And just to clarify some of the communications, I asked one of our comm medics to talk about what he thought that the problem was. And this is what he said really briefly. He said, medic unit hits EID activation and communications creates an EID call that auto RA police, so request assistance police, for call type assist code 3. Several times we wait for an officer or get no units available. EMS supervisor then calls over to APD and pushes to get units assigned. We need to handle this delay. Assist code 3 can be vague, and we use this call type for several reasons, not just when a medic is being assaulted or in distress, for ground control, animal attack, etc. We've always had to explain to APD why they are needed, which should not be necessary. And so he's saying that he requests a new type of call to be made on APD side that matches theirs: officer needs assistance hotshot or officer in distress hotshot. If they did that, that would require APD to break calls that they are assigned to and respond quickly or more quickly.
Yeah, I think that definitely creating some kind of different call category, something that triggers, or if you guys don't come back with information right away, that should also trigger, hey, someone's in distress. Because if one of our officers were to hit their panic button, I'm calling it panic button because that's what comes to mind right now, and they weren't going to respond right away, all the officers are going to be like, okay, they're in trouble and they're going to go. I think we should potentially make the same assumptions for y'all. So.
And just, we'll have time for one more comment here. We're this will definitely come back to us. We're just now digging into it, so let's keep that in mind in the next few months or so. We hope to revisit this issue in greater depth. So if anyone has any closing remarks, Commissioner Weber, any questions?
Well, I had intended to make a motion that the city adopt, this additional call type, but it sounds like there's a commitment from the chiefs to do that anyway, so I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, thank you very much for your service and what you do. I admire it greatly and admire the service of everyone in this room greatly. And it's great that we can have these discussions. It's going to make our city a safer place and a safer place for our public servants as well. So thank you. We will now go into, of course, we're coming up against the clock, but with permission, we may go to about 6:05 if that's okay with folks.